Good morning. My name is Suzanne Couch. I am the co-chair of West County Democrats, and I want to welcome you to our March. Was just talking about the April meeting. Our March 2021 West County Democrats meeting. And I welcome all of you. I have had an interesting time with all the weather. It's so wonderful. Like I said, I'm in April already, but we need to, look at all the possibilities that we're going to have. Hopefully we'll be going back to the hall and having meetings soon as we get everybody vaccinated. All right. Wanted to talk to you a little bit before we start. I have just been amazed all week. On Tuesday, a lawyer for the Republican National Committee, his name is Michael Corbin, went before the Supreme Court and testified in front of Coney Barrett, and he said that they can't strike down the Arizona law that discriminates against people because it will give the Democrats an unfair advantage because they will have too many people to vote. And so we have to keep everything sectioned off so that the Republicans have a chance to win offices. So if this is a zero-sum game, it's an interesting proposition. So one thing I think we all need to think about, because everybody asks me, what can we do at home? And one of the things we can do is get very well versed on what all is going on in terms of discrimination and gerrymandering and trying to regulate voting. And then letters, we can write letters, we can make calls to the senators and all, and that's a good way to keep ourselves busy and to do some real good in terms of hopefully taking away this gerrymandering. All right, this morning I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, and she is going to introduce our speaker. Okay, Karen.
Good morning. Is our speaker with us yet, Mark?
I don't see him on online yet.
Okay. Suzanne, should we go with committee reports first then?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yes, yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Want to do membership?
Yes, go girl.
Okay, our membership report this month is we now have 75 paid members for 2021. So don't forget, you can mail them in. We're going to put the address at the bottom of the screen here. And, let's get our numbers up. And then when we meet all together, we'll have like we used to. So we appreciate everyone taking the time to mail the checks in. It's really been a godsend for us. So thank you.
All right, Jan.
Okay.
You want to do the treasurer's report?
Yes, the February treasurer's report. We had a beginning balance on January 31st. We had $5,848.73. We had $200 in membership dues, and we have an ending balance of $6,048.73.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, as far as our speaker next month, Elaine cannot be with us. Our speaker next month will be David Kimball, and he is from UMSL, and he will be giving us a report on politics as it is in April. So it should be very interesting to hear what he has to say. All right, Karen, back to you. I'm rushing things today, so I'll send it back to you.
Okie doke. Mark, is our speaker with us?
I do not see him, no.
Okay. Well, you want to go ahead and Glenn, you want to go ahead and start? We were going to put Glenn at the very end so that you had more time to ask questions, but if we're waiting on the speaker, it might be a good idea for Glenn to go ahead.
Good morning. Let me start with something I just picked up from Sarah Unsinger's newsletter. Last week, they had a hearing for House Bill 33, which was the transgender bill, which would say a child could only use the restroom or play the sports based on their sexuality at birth. A large number of students came to testify against that bill in Jefferson City, despite all the restrictions, despite all the problems. And so the committee chair of the Children's Committee took that bill off the agenda because there's going to be opposition to it. That's the way our friends on the other side like to play the game. If it looks like somebody's going to stand up to them and oppose what they say, they change the rules. Going to the national scene, we have to remember the Republican Party has no interest in actually governing. Their goal is to deny the power given to President Biden and the House and the Senate by the voters. Their entire operation is designed to throw up roadblocks and make things mess up. And again, despite the fact that Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz and all these others are trying to portray the Republicans as the party of the working people, their actions are still in favor of big business and big money. If you saw yesterday's New York Times, there's a front page story on that. And actually, if you look at the actions of the Republicans, especially in the Senate, they seem much, much more attuned to protecting big business and rich people. For example, to try to slow down the stimulus bill, one senator invoked a seldom used rule that required the poor staff of the Senate to read the phone book sized bill in its entirety before they could begin debate. That accomplished nothing. All the senators had hard copies of the bill. All that did was make the process slower and longer, and it was really unfair to the Senate staffers having to read page after page after page. And by the way, I'd be willing to bet no senator listened to the entire reading of the bill, just as no senator probably read the entire bill. Remember, President Biden is trying to govern by consensus and with bipartisan support. So he spent a lot of time trying to build support on both sides of the aisle for the bill, for the stimulus bill. To that end, he compromised on the amount of money going to unemployment. He allowed them to take the higher minimum wage out of the bill. And then in the end, he worked trying to keep two moderate to conservative Democratic senators, Joe Manchin out of West Virginia and Sinema out of Arizona, happy. So he tried to work with his people. He tried to treat people as colleagues. And unfortunately, that is seen as a sign of weakness in Washington by the Republicans. You give them an inch, they take the inch, and then they try to cut off another foot of the rope. So again, the pandemic unemployment benefit will only be $300 a week instead of $4 or $6, and other things were cut back because of that. Now, another thing to remember is that we're slowly undoing all the damage caused by Trump. The good news is we're already seeing some big changes in the EPA and on things like pipeline regulation, but it's going to take a long time for the new bureaucrats, for the new appointees to undo all the damage created by Trump's appointees. One big example of that is the U.S. Postal Service. The postal director, the postmaster general appointed by Trump, serves at the pleasure of a board of commissioners. Until Biden has the opportunity to replace those commissioners as their terms come up, the odds are we're going to be stuck with a postmaster general who is trying to kill the post office. He is being very anti-labor. He doesn't care that the mail is getting slowed down. He doesn't care that it's making for very hard working conditions for the people in the field. But because of the fact he was appointed to that position by Trump and the commission, there's a commission that oversees him, it will take a while before the postal governors can push them out. So on the state side, Missouri continues to be near the bottom of the list on COVID-19. Every time there's a category, if you want to find Missouri, go to the bottom of the list. We're seeing all sorts of problems, in part because Missouri has not had a major commitment to public health for many years. We spend much less money on public health than the adjoining states and by the national average. What we're finding too, you may have seen it over the weekend, a lot of the testing done in this state was not being counted by the state, which meant that a lot of people who had positive tests were not getting added to the total. On top of that, many of the the counties are not reporting totals on a regular basis. So that as bad as we look on paper, the reality is actually worse. And you've seen the latest scandal in that in these rural counties, Mike Parson, who is a Polk County boy, they send them way more vaccine than they can use. While here in the St. Louis area, we have people driving to Hannibal, to Cape Girardeau, all over the state trying to get shots. So we are going to be one of the last one of the last states in the nation to get clear of COVID. And there's going to be severe economic consequences for that. For example, on tourism, on business, and so on, because who's going to want to send their employees to a state that's at the bottom of the list where there's the greatest chance of getting the bug? Now, I do have a little bit of good news, but it's a little bit. This year, the money coming into the state this fiscal year, and we're now into the fourth quarter for the state's fiscal year, we're running about $1 billion ahead of last year. Remember, last year, the big drop did not come until March, April, and May due to COVID. So the fact that we're about $1 billion ahead on revenue now means there shouldn't have to be a whole lot of withhold or deep cuts. On top of that, even though Parson and the Republicans in Jeff City are all ardent Trump supporters and don't believe in big government, when that stimulus check money or that stimulus bill money comes to Missouri, we will cash the check. And we'll be getting a couple of extra $1 billion into our state budget. So for the first time in a while, the legislators actually have a decent shot of funding most of the important things. What's going to happen is going to be questions about what the priorities are and how that money is spent. The biggest fight this year, it looks like, from everything we're seeing, is going to be on school funding. Now, they have the money to fund their version of the foundation formula, that lower number they came up with several years ago. The problem comes in that there's a contingent of Republicans, and it's not a majority. It's probably a minority of Republicans, but they are pushing ahead to take money from public schools and give more money to charter schools to help fund education savings accounts, which are tax credits, and they're working as well for parent choice, where the parents can decide where the money to educate their child goes. The first bill on this only passed with 83 votes in the House. Now, it takes 82 votes to pass a bill. All of these efforts against public education have done something wonderful. They have brought the School Board Association, the School Administrators Association, the teachers groups, all are united in fighting these changes. Because what they want to do is take tens of millions of dollars out of funding for public schools and essentially shift that to private schools and new charter schools. It looks like they're going to have the votes to allow charter schools in any city with more than 30,000 people. Now, in the St. Louis area and Kansas City area, that's not really an issue. But what it means is that places like Joplin, Springfield, and Columbia are probably going to be seeing charter schools. This is getting the foot in the door so they can twist it and start siphoning more and more money out of public education. Another thing that's coming up is that they're trying to weaken the distinctions between some of the funds that go to the public schools. For example, right now there's a separate line item for transportation. In a lot of our St. Louis County districts, that's not a major expense compared to the district's overall total. But in some of these rural areas where they have buses on the road for an hour and a half each morning and an hour and a half each afternoon, that transportation money is super critical. If you lump the transportation money in with the other money into the foundation formula and just send one check to the school district, well, that means that they're not getting the separate transportation funds. It looks like they're getting more money for instruction, but actually what it means is they're having to spend more of their unrestricted revenue to pay for those buses. Remember too, that one thing they're not talking about is spending the money they need to on broadband across the state. One of the issues we're having is a lot of these rural districts, they don't have the infrastructure in their communities to do quality instruction for the kids at home over laptops and so on, because that broadband capability we all take for granted just isn't out there. So that's a big issue they probably should be looking at as an education issue this year, but it's not coming. Now, one of the big areas we're going to see a fight on is over voter registration and voter access to the polls. Even though the state Supreme Court pretty well threw out most of their voter ID law from a few years ago, they are trying to refashion a voter ID law that will get past the courts. And it actually is more strict than the one the courts originally threw out. In other words, virtually every senior, even if they're in a nursing home, would probably have to make an appearance at a license bureau with the proper identification to get a state ID card if they wanted to vote. And the identification you need for a state ID card is the same as what you need to drive, except for that driving test form. So that's one way they're going after us. Another thing is good old-fashioned voter suppression. We're probably going to see more restrictions on absentee ballots. You remember how nice it was? They opened things up a bit during COVID to make it easier to vote. Well, in Missouri, it didn't make a difference, but in Georgia and other states, they saw that help Democrats. And so Jay Ashcroft is preemptively trying to make it harder to have absentee ballots and other ways to get people to the polls. For one thing they're talking about would be a chain of custody. Well, right now, a volunteer can go to, say, a nursing home and hand people their ballots, then come back and pick up the sealed envelopes and then deliver them to the election authority. That wouldn't be allowed. You could drop off the ballots, but then each person would have to mail their ballot and have it properly signed and so on, and they would have to do that individually, which would just make it harder. Another thing, making it harder to register. Right now, when I was going door to door 4 years or 5 years ago, and other people when going door to door, we handed out voter registration cards, the ones that people could mail back, make it as simple as possible. There's a strong possibility that what some of the things they're talking about is that to register to vote, you would have to go to a designated place. And again, with that, your specific ID. So you would have to go to the revenue office to get your ID, and then go to the library, the election authority, to actually sign up to vote. Like it was years ago, we had to sign up by somebody in front of somebody who was basically allowed to do that. That's going to make it wrong. The strangest bill in the voting sphere, though, one of the outstate reps has a bill which is getting a hearing that says every ballot in Missouri must be cast on paper by filling in a box. But then every ballot must be manually counted. No machines to count the ballots, because we know those machines were built in Venezuela or China to steal votes from Republicans. Imagine what that would mean in St. Louis County, where you have the potential of almost 400,000 ballots. And if you remember what our November ballot looked like, both sides, all those races, can you imagine how many Republicans and Democrats sitting at tables it would take to tally all 400,000 ballots? That would mean that probably the first results from St. Louis County would come out around Christmas time. Because imagine, I think there were 62 issues on the ballot that I had back in November with the judges and everything else. Imagine if all of that had to be manually tallied. No optical scanners, no technology. As crazy as that sounds, there are many Republicans who like it because they say that way it's safe and there's less chance of fraud. However, where in St. Louis County or Jefferson County or any of the other major counties, you would find enough volunteers willing to work for what they pay to spend days and days and days manually counting ballots is beyond me. Let's go to some of the perennial bad ideas that are bouncing around the Capitol building. The first one, as you've probably heard, is the Second Amendment Preservation Act. That still has legs. That is the gun bill that would not allow a St. Louis County police officer to work with the federal government or enforce federal gun laws. So say, for example, that Dale and Dave wanted to drive around town with a turret on top of their car with twin 50 caliber machine guns. That's not allowed under federal law. You have to have a special license for machine guns, and there's also restrictions on where they can be used. However, under the Second Amendment Preservation Act, if the machine guns were manufactured in Missouri, Dave and Dale could put their turret on top of their car and drive around with machine guns. More importantly, in St. Louis City, they've used federal law to get a lot of guns off the street where people who are convicted felons or otherwise, for other reasons, shouldn't be in possession of a firearm. Those cases are bounced to the federal courts because the way the system works, getting a conviction on a felon in possession of a firearm is much easier there than it is in state court, plus the fact that feds have more resources. Not only would a St. Louis City or St. Louis County or state patrolman not be able to refer that case to the feds, their agency could be fined $50,000 for trying or thinking about referring that case to the feds. In other words, Missouri would hold itself above the law. Missouri would decide what was the appropriate interpretation of the Second Amendment. And there would be virtually no limitations in Missouri on guns, including things like machine guns. That goes along with the new Guns Everywhere bill, which I call Guns Everywhere on steroids. Under this proposal this year, not only would we have guns in grocery stores and libraries, we would have them, no church pastor could tell his congregation he didn't want guns in the building. In schools, the janitor could walk around with a gun on his hip. In the most bizarre situation, we mentioned this last month, on Metrolink, on a bus or Metrolink train or on a Metro bus, all of the passengers could be armed, even if the security guards aren't allowed to carry guns. When we say guns everywhere, that's pretty much what it means. Casinos, churches, only a very few government buildings would be prohibited. And the problem is, it would make it much harder for businesses and so on, because imagine working in a place like, say, the complaint counter at a store, at a department store, knowing that everybody coming to your counter, if you didn't make them happy, was carrying a gun. Another bad idea coming back, must work for food stamps. This is something that has been around since the Clinton administration and Newt Gingrich back in the 1990s. In Missouri, we've been trying it ever since then, and we can't make it work. The problem is, it sounds good to say, oh, if you want to get food stamps, you've got to be out there actively trying to get a job or working and so on. It overlooks the fact that a significant portion of those getting food stamps already have jobs. A lot of time, the problem is the jobs don't pay enough to keep them their head above water. The other problem is, before you can get a job, somebody has to have a job to give you. And if you say you have to work 20 or 30 hours a week, that means that job they give you has to offer 20 or 30 hours a week of labor. That's very unrealistic, especially in the rural areas. And we know from experience, again, among all the states, even back in the 1990s when they called the program Futures and they actually put resources towards it, we had very little success. Right now, we have a must-work program for temporary assistance for adults. All those people who work on job placement say the two things that really help people get jobs the most are on-the-job training and education related to employment. Most months in the entire state of Missouri, we have no one getting on-the-job training and maybe one or two people statewide getting any education related to employment. And that includes 3 and 4 and 5 week courses. So that program, that idea probably is going to get close to the finish line. If it does get enacted, it's going to have to be challenged in court, and we're probably going to see a lot of problems. Now, new this year, this was something we didn't see coming. It is highly likely that by the end of the session in May, that January 12th of every year in Missouri will be Rush Limbaugh Day. The good news is it's not yet a paid state holiday. The bad news is the sponsor of the legislation is already talking about formal recognition in the Capitol and a ceremony every year to recognize Rush Limbaugh and his contributions to Missouri and the nation. So, do have a little bit more good news. Right now, the governor of the state of Missouri has a very, very big wall of enemies. They are not the Democratic Party. They are not our Democratic legislators. It is his fellow Republicans. Notice how the governor wanted to do his state of the state address in the state capitol in the House chamber, and the House said no due to COVID restrictions. If you look online during the House sessions now, you will see that virtually none of the Republicans are wearing masks. They don't social distance, and yet they weren't going to let the governor come in and use their chamber because of COVID. It's very obvious the governor is not playing well with his House and Senate leadership. That may have a lot to do with the fact that the governor has proposed some really stupid things, like taking back the money state workers gave to unemployed people that they now say they need to repay. The legislature, both Democrats and Republicans, almost instantly were saying, wait a minute, that's not fair. These people did not ask for the money. They were told how much money they were going to get by the state. And if the state gives you the money and you spend it on food, you spend it on utilities, you shouldn't have to pay it back. But the governor's unhappiness with the legislature is probably going to get worse. There are some things up there right now. For example, there's a proposal to raise legislator pay. The legislators would love to get paid more, but it's politically touchy for them to say they want more pay when at the same time they're trying to hold down spending for, trying to hold down raises for state employees and so on. Also, one of the crazy outside legislators wants to undo the Missouri minimum wage and put it into law that Missouri can never have a minimum wage anywhere in the state, one penny above the federal minimum wage. Medicaid expansion is my last big topic. Many of us signed the petitions. Many of us worked to get Medicaid expanded in Missouri. Right now, there's a two-pronged effort to undo that vote. At the bureaucratic level, they have decided they're going to segregate these new people from Medicaid expansion into what they call the Adult Eligibility Group, AEG. Separate forms, separate managed care contracts, and possibly separate reimbursement rates. Now, to make sure that this gets off to a rough start, the state's also talking about decreasing the number of employees in the Department of Social Services by about 200 workers at a time when they expect 300,000 more people to become eligible for Medicaid. So on the bureaucratic level, we're trying to make it hard to implement the Medicaid expansion. Meanwhile, over in the Capitol, they are setting things up to make the appropriation for the expanded Medicaid a separate set of line items than traditional Medicaid. And a few of the Republicans are even admitting that they keep it separate, then they don't have to fund it. And if they don't fund it, then it has to go to court, and they have a chance of getting Medicaid expansion killed that way. So even though we passed Medicaid expansion, even though Medicaid expansion is going to help primarily, almost completely, working poor adults. In other words, people who get up every morning and go to work, and it's going to give them their access to health care. We may find ourselves having to sit back and watch a year or even 2 or 3 years of legal action to enforce what Missourians voted in. Remember puppy mill, remember concealed carry. The Missouri legislature, the Republicans in the Missouri legislature do not believe we're smart enough to make decisions. And unfortunately, Medicaid expansion is going to be their next big fight. One last thing is on the census. Normally by this time after the census, there would be the detailed information that city governments, county governments, the state government use to determine lines for the 2022 elections. The latest we're hearing is that those numbers will not come out until the end of September. Remember, in Missouri, we had Clean Missouri, and that was overturned by Dirty Missouri that the Republicans put on the ballot. We could see a situation, we'll probably see a situation where the Republicans try to rush through their district lines and their version of what everything should look like in a short period of time between the end of September and the end of the year. Remember, many local election filings begin right after the first of the year. And there's an awful lot of work that government agencies or governments have to do to draw up these lines. We also have to expect that the Republicans are not going to draw lines that give us our fair representation. If you look at the way the lines were drawn 10 years ago, they did everything they could to minimize Democratic votes, minimize the number of Democratic districts. We have to expect that the 2022 lines will be worse. We have to expect that that's what's going to happen.
All right, thank you, Glenn. If we have time, when our speaker is finished, if Glenn will stick around, we'll answer questions. All right, everyone, I'm going to give it to Karen. Karen, you want to introduce our speaker?
I'd be happy to. Our topic today is 2021 Vision for Missouri by Michael Butler, who is St. Louis Recorder of Deeds and the new Missouri Democratic Party's incoming chair. He's excited to lead over 1 million Missouri Democrats for the coming year. He says the road ahead to rebuild the state party is long and arduous, as we've just heard, but the team knows the work well. Mr. Butler is a former educator in the St. Louis public school system and previously served as state representative in House District 79. Please join us in welcoming Michael Butler. He's here somewhere.
Yes. Thanks, Karen. Hey, thanks everybody. Thanks for
Nice
having
to
me on the
meet you
call.
virtually.
I'm here at the, you got it. I'm here at the Missouri Democratic Party offices in Kansas City. Drove up here this morning, going to be here today, and then in Jefferson City tomorrow. We'll be back in St. Louis. Our internet is a little unstable, so if I do freeze up, if Karen can like wave at me or something like, or somebody let me know that I need to repeat something, just let me know.
Mike?
So I do have that anyone has, and I'll end with talking about some. I see my man Dennis Lavely on the call again too. So he is our chair of our long-term strategic planning committee. I'll probably put on the spot to do 1 minute again. So it's I'm just very happy about the work that he's doing for our long-term plan. Does everybody still see me? You guys are all frozen on my screen.
We can't see you.
Guess I might have lost it.
You're there, but yeah.
Cool.
We can hear you.
We can
You
hear
can hear
you.
me, but you can't see me. Okay, cool.
Mhm.
No worries. As long as you can still hear me, it's great. I'll share my screen and see if that helps out at all. Just screen sharing. Oh, I'm the host now. Awesome. Perfect. I can hear you guys in there. Can folks see that
Yes,
my
you're-
screen share
yeah.
there?
Yes.
Great.
We're good.
Great. I'm gonna resume slideshow. Yep. Cool. Let's go to the second slide. No worries.
I like the logo.
So I have is that culture trumps strategy any day. And while we have a great strategy that we're building, a long-term strategy and a short-term strategy for the Missouri Democratic Party, I do realize there are some culture changes we need to do as a party. And the first one, I like to talk, there's three of them. And the first I like to talk about is expanding the Missouri Democratic Party family. Before our Democratic Party really considered the family of the party, it's just
Lose them at all.
Can you see me now, guys?
Yeah.
Very,
That's bad. I'm back. Is Karen? Am I better now?
Yes.
Okay. I'll share my screen again. I'm sorry. I just got kicked off for a second. All right. Is that better, guys? Am I back? All good. Cool.
Yes. Yes.
State committee members, some statewides, and really statewide candidates, and the Missouri Democratic Party really just focused on electing our statewides. And when we had 5 out of the 8 statewides across the states, we since 2016, that seemed to work, and it was very important that we hold on to those. Now that we have 1 statewide left in our great Alderman Callaway, statewide candidates, we want to expand the Missouri Democratic Party family to include more groups. That means including local county committees, the HDCCC, the SDCC across the state, from local elected officials like nurses to county elected officials like recorder of deeds, and state, of course, our statewide candidates, MDP staff, and of course, Missouri Democratic Party volunteers, so folks like yourself. We want to make sure that I've been saying that everyone's invited to Thanksgiving this year. In the past, the House Democratic Campaign Committee and the Senate Democratic Campaign Committee were pretty much treated as stepchildren.
Froze again.
And folks were allowed to participate, but they weren't really invited into into the planning and into really moving the party forward. And we're changing that. The NDP family includes everyone from the county committee person to our state auditor, and we want to make sure that we're engaging folks all across the state. Next, a cultural change. A big cultural change we want to do is we want to change our end user. In the past, our end user really focused around serve our governor, our lieutenant governors, or our attorney general's candidates, like those statewide candidates that really brought it. We're going to still support candidates, so we want to include supporting volunteers. Our end user must be you. It must be many of you. Our goal is to have over 10,000 total volunteers statewide, and hopefully 2,000 of those will be super volunteers statewide. We want an army of Democrats who are willing to roll up their sleeves and work hard for the party. I've been known to say that as state party chair, I alone will not save this party. Thousands of volunteers across this state will save this party, and we need your help. And because of that, we've got on me and my friends in Jefferson City. It'll be on our end user will be volunteers and folks who can do the work better than I ever could. Last cultural change we have is rewarding helpful behavior. In previous years, we've really engaged folks all across the state and folks in groups to get them in line with our way of thinking. And if folks, in a sense, either praise us too hard or were opposition to us or complained about the party, we would engage those folks just to keep the PR right. Now our culture change, rewarding helpful behavior, is proactively engaging, granting access to groups, and rewarding folks in groups who want to do the work to make MDP's goals a reality. At the end of the day, there are already thousands of people who want to get involved in the Missouri Democratic Party, whether from a central committee group, as a committee person, through a nonprofit group, nonprofits who have volunteers want to engage us in partnership. We're proactively reaching out to those groups. We're going to be granting them as much access as possible, and we want to make sure that we have a helpful and a cooperative relationship with all these groups and all these folks. And most importantly, because we have so many people want to engage and support our goals, it's difficult for us to spend time on folks who just want to complain. So all that culture change moves into one huge strategy change we have with the party. And that strategy change is decentralization. We plan to decentralize the party. What that means to me is that we will hire staff mostly around the state. So previously, the Missouri Democratic Party will hire 2 to 10 staff centralized in one location. Last cycle was Kansas City, and then virtually before it'd be like Jefferson City or Columbia. A lot of people expected me to grow a staff in St. Louis. We're not going to do that this time.
You're freezing up again.
Now I hired a communications director, a data director. I'm going to pause for a second. Is that better? You guys see Karen, I'm on?
Yeah.
I'm back here and I'm going to go good.
Yeah, you're kind of freezing up
She's frozen.
occasionally. Cool. Yeah.
If I'm all good, I'm gonna keep going.
Okay, keep going. We're good.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So that centralized staff will just be 2 more folks, and then we'll begin and the goal is by October 2021, start to open and support 10 regional offices. So our decentralization will mostly include opening those offices and making sure we have a local staff person who is the face of the party locally, not just me statewide. What that really means is that we used to hire folks in a centralized location and expect them to cover the whole state with their job. And that was just impossible to do. And now that we're changing our end user, that we're focusing more on volunteers, that we're focusing on proactively reaching out to community partners and groups and folks, and more importantly, expanding our family to be more than just folks in Jeff city, we've got to expand where we are visibly, expand where the party in these different regions throughout the state, and we're going to do that. How we're gonna accomplish that? There are plenty of different tasks we need to do as a party, but I usually break campaign cycles down into 4 phases, and our timeline is really based on these 4 phases of an election cycle. First is a research phase, 2 is a relationship phase, 3 is a learning curve phase, and 4 is what I call the heat of the campaign. During an election cycle, each of these phases lasts 6 months. Break them down into pretty much 4 quarters of the election cycle. And right now we are currently in our research phase, which means we are gathering all the data we need as an organization that will last us throughout the entire cycle. This is voter profiles. We're gathering organizational lists. We're gathering donor lists. We're gathering volunteer lists. We're currently gathering locations in rural Missouri to put highway signs, 4x8 signs when it comes to election time. So we're gathering all the data we need so that we can execute our strategy. Our second phase, the relationship phase, is when we take all that data and it tells us who we need to start to build our relationships with. So we'll spend 6 months building strong relationships and making asks and getting commitments from Democrats all across the state and independents all across the state to prepare for our full running our full campaign that starts in the learning curve phase. Our learning curve phase will start in January 2022. Is usually when I run a full force campaign. We have everybody hired. We have all the data we need. We are starting to implement and execute our strategy, knowing that we're going to make mistakes. So from January through June of 2022, we're gonna have some events where only 10 people show up, but that's fine during that time. We're gonna have some times where we might say something wrong, but that's fine during that time. We get our learning curve out, we're making our mistakes, and then by June of 2022, in the heat of the campaign, from June to November, we'll be running like a well-oiled machine. And we believe that 150 days on our A game against Republicans, we can't be beat, that we're going to win. We're building our strategy. We're getting all the information we need, and it's setting the tone for what we need to do for the heated campaign. What I realize is that our party and a lot of candidates across the state in the past, that we're losing a lot of times is folks trying to do during the heat of the campaign what they should have done already in the research phase. Folks will try to find out, well, who's the person I should call in West Plains, Missouri, in order to get something done really quickly. That information a year ago, and we're making sure we're getting that done right now. So what do we need help with right now? We need your help. The research phase is every phase is very important, but for right now, it's the most important thing we're doing. We need help building lists. We've got about 8 different lists that we're building. Like I said, donor lists. We do need help sifting through donors and adding more names to the donor lists that we haven't acquired over the years. We need help with our highway signs list. Find out where good visible spots are. Maybe you live on an intersection in St. Louis County that you'd love to put a highway sign for the state on. We're going to put up 400 highway signs across.
Frozen. Michael, we've lost you.
List of folks to call or sent them a letter or an email to remind them to give. This very helpful. Last cycle, we're not raising as much. We're raising more money than we had 2 years ago, but Josh Hawley is helping us raise that money, but he's also raising quite a bit more than us. So we've got a lot of work to do to catch up with fundraising. Third thing is social media sharing. We're gonna, as part of our media plan, we need your help in sharing the press releases and the messages we're getting out on social media. We can talk more about that. And last, we've got some new committees that we've that I appointed in order to get closer to people and get closer to those volunteers. One is called the New Ideas Committee, which you can submit your idea to the party for what you think we should be doing. We have a committee that will review that idea and then help that idea grow. And second is a community engagement committee. And that committee will help to partner with nonprofit organizations all across the state in order for us to do some community work and showcase our candidates and our party as community leaders, not just as politicians. With that, any questions? There's my contact information if you need to call or text me or email me, and I'll take any questions at this time.
Okay. Do we have any questions this morning?
I'm glad I got through that, Karen. Thank you, Karen. I
Do we
saw
have
a
any
question
good
in the chat. And I
candidates to run for Senate? Roy
We
Blunt
do.
is not
Very
running
good.
for the election.
Yep, I saw. So we are happy that Roy Blunt has declined to run again. I will say that Roy was most likely gonna raise quite a bit of money. I will say that the message in the plan, the campaign plan against Roy Blunt would have been clear. Jason Cantor did a good job of showcasing that 6 years ago. And I see someone that Scott Sifton is running for United States Senate. He has been the only candidate to fully announce right now. Scott Sifton from St. Louis County, from South St. Louis County, is a very good candidate, and he's what I consider a tier 2 candidate. He is by far the best candidate to say he's going to run at this point. There are a couple other folks who have not announced yet, who are considering running, but right now Scott Sifton, State Senator Scott Sifton, is the only announced candidate.
Let me see what other questions we have here. What is the Missouri Democratic Party doing to broker collaboration with non-political special interest groups like organized labor, rural agriculture, faith groups, and business advocacy?
That's a very good question. Very question. We're being proactive and reaching out to these folks. So the political atmosphere now, it does not include just political parties. It includes C4s and C3s and plenty of different places where individual volunteers and individual donors volunteers can give their time. Individual donors can give their money to other than just a political party, which means that the party doesn't have competition, but we have partners to work with. And I understand that better than anybody. I helped create some of these C3s and C4s in the St. Louis region as a member I was on a board of a very prominent nonprofit here in the region. And so I'm familiar with a lot of the players from unions to the C3s to the C4s. I actually know pretty much all of them. And we've worked together in the past. Me and the state legislator, the head of the unions used to be my minority floor leader, and his political director used to serve. We used to serve in the House together. So we're friends. We're folks that we've been working together quite a bit over the past three months. We're working on different. What makes the party different from these organizations is that each organization has their own topic that is important to them, and the party has to work on everything. So we are. I've had conversations on redistricting with C3s and union organization and the union AFL-CIO concerning volunteerism with different community partners that C3s that we can work together with, and then of course other topics like voter protection we'll be working with different groups on. But we're gonna be partnering and not competing with C3s and C4s this year in this space.
Okay, let's see. We have another question here. This was going to be my question. What types of national money does the Missouri Democratic Party have access to? Do we have money coming from the
Very
national
good
party?
question. We do. So we currently get $10,000 a month from the DNC, and that's mostly to run our operational work. So to fund our accounting firm and fund some our base staff. So to fund partially our executive director. we're going to be requesting more of that. There are special grants that the DNC offers that we did receive one in 2018, really with the help of Stephen Weber and Claire McCaskill, especially. But we're going to be we believe we're a state in play, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But we're hoping that we'll get some money from the DNC. Now that Roy Blunt is no longer running, we were already always targeting the DSCC, which stands for the Democratic State Campaign Committee, which is the National U.S. Senate Campaign Committee. We were targeting them for 2024 against Josh Hawley, so we can build our infrastructure now that we be ready for 24. Now that Blunt is not running, we're hoping they may be a little more interested. We're gonna, Randy, we need to make that call today. That would be a good call to make again today. So the DSCC, we're hoping we're gonna make an ask of as well. We've already talked to Congressman Cleaver and Congresswoman Cori Bush. They're overwhelmingly helpful to help us get national funds. We're very lucky with our congresspeople. They both have a separate group of DNC friends to help us grab funds from progressive PACs and organizations that have been around a long time with Congressman Cleaver. So we're going to have access through our congresspeople, through them. Both our congresspeople are on our executive committee for the Democratic State Committee, so they've been dialed in and very helpful. And I would say the last thing is, just like I mentioned there are C3 and C4 and PACs in the state that we have to partner with. There are also plenty of PACs and C4s at the national level that we're going to build relationships with. So other than just our Democratic State Campaign Committee, the Democratic National Committee giving us national funds, we're going to be going to DC quite a bit more than we have in the past to make sure we're building relationships with some political action committees as well.
There was an interesting little conversation going on in the chat box. I was curious as to what a super volunteer is. Somebody said the super volunteers wear capes. So I'd like to wear a Democratic cape. How do I get one of those? I don't have very deep pockets.
Thanks, Karen. They do wear capes. A super volunteer is generally 5 hours or more per week. And that is someone who's described as a super volunteer. A normal volunteer is usually someone who'll give 1 to 2 hours once a year or every 6 months. But those super volunteers are folks who sometimes work full time or just work or give their time weekly and give as much free time as they can possible. So love to be in contact with you, Karen. I have your cell number, so I'm gonna get you a cape soon.
I still like the idea of wearing a Democratic cape. really get really into that. Okay.
All right.
Oh, I've got a couple more questions.
Can you wrap it up?
Yes. Where do you see these 10 field offices being? Like in what location? We're going to put one.
Great question. Many of them will be in our St. Louis City, St. Louis County, of course, St. Charles County, Boone County, Jackson County already has one, so we'll continue to support that. Southwest Missouri already has one, continue to support that. Greene County already has one, continue to support that one. Cape Girardeau, Buchanan County, and we haven't really decided on the 10th one yet, but urban and then some suburban areas. Lee Summit or a second one in South County are kind of on the hook right now.
Somebody also requested your I put up in the chat box your email. What was the phone number? 314-6 something, or if you have that slide accessible easily enough.
Yes. Yep, I'll put in the chat here right now. It's my new
Got
MVP
the Michael at MissouriDems.org, but not the phone number.
Thank you. There it is. 314-365-5118, and I'm putting in the chat right now.
All right, thank you.
And I thank Glenn for answering that C3 and C4 question and answering some questions for me in the chat. Thank you guys so much for that.
right.
And I guess I'm needing to wrap up. Dennis, we'll get together another time. I just want to do shout out Dennis Lively again. Dennis is like I said, chairing our long-term strategic planning committee, which means he's got 10 years in mind. Like you guys, we're hoping to take. I plan to be chair for more than one cycle and to keep some continuous things going on, but I don't plan to be chair for 5 cycles, guys, for 10 years. And I don't think I'll be around when we take back the majority in the legislature. Dennis Lively and Dennis Roach and other state committee members are planning our long-term strategy that is going to really help us look forward. And I just can't wait till he's done with his work so I can be sure to add a lot of that stuff and what we can do now.
Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you guys for your time.
It's been wonderful. Keep us apprised of everything. We're always here for you. We're always here to help whenever we can. So thank you so much. All right, everyone, that concludes our meeting. But if you would like to stay online, Glenn's going to be here for a few minutes if you have a question.
And I have one mild correction. I got my anti-trans bills messed up. House Bill 33, which the young people went to speak against, is the one that would make it a lose your license offense for any medical provider to give counseling or treatment for gender identification to anyone under age 18, and also would cause their parents to be reported to DSS for child abuse.
Oh my God.
I was confusing 33 with the sports ones, the bathroom bill, and it's anytime you can be against something in Missouri, you can count on the Republicans being there. Any questions?
I have a question, Glenn, Sandra. Do you have any idea why Blunt is not going to run again and heard that Ann Wagner might run? Because it makes a difference of what's going on. I know we're happy about it, but what would be a reason?
3 things have been popping up. One, Blunt is 71 years old, and he is an old-fashioned traditional Republican, whereas now the Republican Party is all Trump. So his discomfort level with his own party is probably fairly high. The second thing is the fact that he was probably going to face at least 1 or 2, maybe a bunch of Trump-like candidates in the primary. And one of those candidates could have been Eric Wright. So he was looking at a bruising primary. Third, his wife makes more than $1 million a year as a lobbyist. 2 of his sons live in Washington and are high-powered lobbyists. He's 71 years old. He might want to make a few million more dollars himself as a lobbyist, which he could very easily with his connections for a few years, rather than be there at 4 in the morning while the Senate clerk is reading the stimulus bill. So this could be, it's actually a sign of intelligence that he's pulling his ripcord, because he's probably not happy. He can make more money somewhere else, and he'd have a very bruising primary.
Thanks.
One interesting thing I noted in the Post article, they're looking at Mike Kehoe and Eric Schmidt being among those wanting to run for Blunt's seat. That could create a problem for the Republicans, having 2 people in their upper administration in Jeff City going at it tooth and nail. But right now, the most interesting candidate being mentioned is retired NASCAR driver Carl Edwards. The good news is he'd probably make a great appearance at rallies, driving up in a NASCAR. But the bad news is I don't know if he really has the background for governance. So, any other questions?
All right. Thank you all very much. And we'll be back next month. So put it on your calendar. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Go vote. Go vote.
Yes.
April 6th. Local elections are important.
Yes. All right. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.